Well, this morning we began talking about the laborers being few and what matters in our lifestyle is that there is work that needs to be done. And as a Christian, we need to be doing that work. The harvest is abundant. There's many who are in this world that are lost that need to be taught and told the gospel. And as a Christian, that's our work to do. We're to work in our attendance as we come together and worship God. That's a small part of what we do in service to Him, but we are told to come together and worship Him as Christians because of the strength that we draw from one another when we're together. In Bible study, we find ourselves unemployed here, not because there's not work to do, but because we're not willing to do it. We're supposed to be searching the scriptures and studying so that we can handle God's word properly and grow in it. We do that so that we are qualified to teach others. And we teach not only by word, but more importantly, oftentimes by our example. And the world should see a difference in our lives. Also, we are to labor in our giving. Paul in Acts chapter 20 and verse 35 is quoting Jesus here. And he says that Jesus says it's more blessed to give than to receive. That means the giver is happier. The giver is more blessed than the receiver because we have something to help another with and we give of ourself, of our time, of our talent, of our treasure. And truly, if we're generous in our mind, we rejoice in those opportunities when we know we're able to help someone out. Not because we're a social media influencer and we want to take a picture of us doing that. I have never understood why someone would do that and then brag about it. The scriptures, that's one thing that the scriptures talk about, that your right hand's not supposed to know what your left hand's doing. I'm not supposed to go around telling. And why would somebody want to take advantage of the situation? Yes, look at me. Look at how good I am. And look at this poor person that I'm doing something for. That's not how a Christian should look at our giving. We should be happy that we're in a position to help someone else, not in the fact that we want to boast about our giving. The Lord knows our hearts, and we're to give as we have been prospered. He knows our hearts, but He also knows our bank account. In 1 Corinthians chapter 16 and beginning in verse 1, are we giving as we have been prospered? Are we fair with God? He's going to know whether or not we are giving as we have been prospered. Are we fair with Him in our contribution? 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 1, now concerning the collection for the saints, as I have given orders to the churches of Galatia, so you must do also. On the first day of the week, let each one of you lay something aside, storing up as he may prosper, that there be no collections when I come. If I prosper more one week over another, some people maybe work overtime or make more money sometimes with projects, side projects or something like that. If I'm making more money one week, then I better have that reflected in my giving if I'm going to be working for the Lord correctly. But now, this would not be limited to just our finances. What about giving of our talents and our time as well? There's always been a they mentality. Well, they'll take care of that. There's something that needs to be done. But we're going to point the finger, not necessarily pointing the finger at this congregation. We don't have enough people to have a they. Who's going to take care of it? Well, not many. But there is always an elusive they. They'll take care of it. Something needs doing, but they'll do it. If I'm able, and we'll look at some scriptures that show this, if I am able to do it and I have an opportunity to do it, then I need to take care of it. If there's a job that needs to be done and I have the ability to do it and I'm qualified to do it, I'm not qualified to do every job out there. I may not have the ability to do everything that needs doing. But if I am, then I should be the one taking care of it. And I'm to do that cheerfully. I remember the days years ago when we had gospel meetings, and what would we had one in the spring and one in the fall, and we would always have a building cleaning before we had the gospel meeting, a deeper clean of the building, just because we were expecting more visitors and we wanted it to look nice. So, and just because it needed it every so often, a deeper clean than the normal cleaning that we had done. And back then, how many able-bodied members did we have? We had way more than we do now, but out of them, how many of them actually showed up to do the work? Think of it, not just the work that was beneficial during those cleanings. Yes, the building needed to be cleaned and freshened and spruced up before the gospel meeting, but what about our time spent together working? The time that we had to grow and to bond with one another, the laughter that was shared, the enjoyment of being around fellow Christians working, that was more beneficial than just the building getting cleaned. But again, I would ask, and I don't remember because I was pretty young when these were happening, but I know everyone that went here didn't show up the day that the building cleaning was scheduled. For some may have had legitimate reasons, some may just not wanted to come at all. But the minority should not be forced to bear the financial or physical burdens for everyone. If that's happening, that's the problem with socialism. We run out of somebody else's money to spend. And eventually, the minority realizes that they're supporting everybody, and they quit. They're supporting the wealthy, and they're supporting the extreme poor and the middle class. And that's what happens in every time in history with socialism. What has happened? The middle class has collapsed because it cannot support everybody. The minority in the Lord's church should not be supporting everybody. There's work that we all need to do. We're to give as we've been prospered, and we're to give cheerfully. In 2 Corinthians chapter 9 and in verse 7, we're to do our work from a cheerful heart, so let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. Now, that does not give us the license to keep lowering that amount to the point where I can do it cheerfully. Well, I make this much money, so I'm going to give this. Well, that hurts me, so I'm going to give less and less until it makes me happy. No, that's not what Jesus is wanting. That's not a good heart either. I am in a position, I should be thankful and blessed that I am able to do this. Yes, I am taking part of my money that I've worked for, but I am giving it back to the Lord, who has blessed me with the ability to do all of that. Remember when Jesus was watching over the treasury? He's watching over it today when we come in as well and put our money in, but he was watching, and the widow come in and she put in 2 mites. And he said she had given more than all of them because they were casting in out of their abundance. And she gave all she had out of her need. It came from her heart. God knows our bank account. He also knows our heart. And he knows our abilities. We're not expected to give or to do what we don't have. Never, ever in any command has God told us to do something that we're unable to do. In 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and in verse 12, there are a lot of people that I would like to help, that I may see a need. If you are on watching TV or on social media, you see needs. But there's not always an opportunity or the means to do so. 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and verse 12, Paul says, "For if there is first a willing mind, it is accepted according to what one has, and not according to what he does not have. I'm going to be judged based on my ability to do, not based on what I wanted to do or what I wish I could do. It's what I can do. What do I have? And God is not going to give me more than I can handle either, including financial success. In Matthew chapter 25 and verse 15, he tells us in Corinthians that we're not going to be tempted above what we're able to bear, but he's not going to give us more financially success than what we can handle either. And he knows this in Matthew chapter 25 with the parable of the talents. That's not talents as in I can do something. I have the ability to do something. That was amount of money, a denomination of money. And he knew what those three men's ability were. And in verse 15, and to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his own ability. He knew what their ability was. And immediately he went on a journey. Sometimes success can be as difficult to handle as hardship. Sometimes a lot of money can be, and many times the scriptures would say it is, more difficult than the lack of money. One day I would love to be able to test that out. To have so much money I wouldn't know what to do with, but maybe that's why we don't, right? Because maybe God knows what our ability to handle it would be. If we read on in Matthew chapter 25, when the day of reckoning came and the master returned from his journey, and the men had to settle up and give an account for what they had done with their money, he did not expect the man that he gave 1 talent to earn 10 times that. Well, the man that he gave 5 talents to turned around and gave him 5 more. He didn't look at that 1 talent man and say, you should have given me 10 on top of that. You should have got 9 more talents, did he? But he did expect him to do something with it. That man did absolutely nothing with it besides bury it in the ground. We know, if we're being honest with ourselves, we may not want to be honest with ourselves. We may not want to be honest with others. We know what our talents, our abilities, and our finances are. And if we're not working for the Lord and using them right, then we're not laboring properly for Him. The laborers are also sparse in benevolence when it comes to doing good and caring about others. James chapter 1 and verse 21 beginning. A simple definition of benevolence is well-meaning and kindly, charitable rather than profit-making. I'm not going at this so I can do something and earn something. I'm doing this so I can help someone else and not get anything in return for it. Doing good for others without physical reward is the fundamental part of Christianity. I'm giving something to someone else and I'm not expecting anything back in return except the knowing that I helped them. And that's what James says here in James chapter 1 and beginning in verse 21. Therefore lay aside all filthiness and overflow of wickedness and receive with meekness the implanted word which is able to save your souls. But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man observing his natural face in a mirror. For he observes himself, goes away, and immediately forgets what kind of man he was. But he who looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues in it, and is not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this one will be blessed in what he does. If anyone among you thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his own heart, this one's religion is useless. Pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this, to visit the orphans and widows in their trouble and to keep oneself unspotted from the world. Right there, verse 27. Pure religion, you're going to go help those in need, not visit with them, like sit down and have a conversation with them and get up and leave. You're going to help them in their need. Those widows and orphans are not in a place to help you in return. They're not going to give you something back. You're helping them because there's a need. And what does he say here? Again, we looked at Matthew this morning talking about that. When we let our light shine, what do they see? They see our works. And again, there's that dirty word in James chapter 1 and verse 27, verse 26. You're a doer of the work. Verse 25. I'll get the verse right here in a minute. Verse 25, you're a doer of the work that needs to be done. Not like the one that looks at it, hears it, and then turns around and leaves it undone. We're doing it. It defines our faith because We can say we have faith. We can say we love God. James chapter 2 and verse 14, beginning. But I show my faith in my action, not my words. James chapter 2 and beginning in verse 14. What does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can faith save him? If a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you says to them, depart in peace, be warmed and filled, but you do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. What good is it? I don't know how someone that believes in faith only, without any works on our part, can read James chapter 2. What am I doing if I am not practicing what I'm believing in? If I'm not backing it up by actions, by helping those in need? What good is it if I have the ability and means to help someone and I refuse to do that? I'm showing a dead faith if that's what I'm doing. Even if it puts me out a little bit. I mean, no, nothing here says that we should do it only if it's convenient for me. If I see a need and I'm able to help somebody with that need, I need to help them to take care of that. Can't and won't are two completely different things, and God knows the difference between them. We do too, if we're going to be honest. He knows when I can't help someone. There are things for various reasons that I can't do. There's also things that I just don't want to do. I'm just being lazy. That's not going to be an excuse when I stand before God. Now we can go back to look at Galatians chapter 6. And if we read Galatians chapter 6, some might say, well, that's a contradictory chapter there, because he's talking about helping one another. And then down a few verses, he says, now everyone's got to bear their own load. There's a difference in helping someone with a burden that they can't lift versus them being unwilling to lift what they can. One of those things that he's talking about is their obedience to the gospel. I can't obey the gospel for them. I can't deny, as we were talking in our Bible study this morning about self-denial. I can't deny their self. Oh, I mean, I can. You can't do that, but I can. But I can't deny self for them. That's something they have to do. But there's other things, and we can say that for another lesson, that people need to take care of on their own. There's things that we're to work for if we're able. There's things that we're to do. I'm not obligated to take care of every single possible need for someone that's unwilling to do for themselves what they can. But our love must go just beyond words. It's useless if it's only words. It's not worth the air that they're spoken into. 1 John chapter 3 and beginning in verse 16. So many points can be made from this one passage here. If I see a need and I turn my back on it, very simply, God's love is not in me. It's just that simple. 1 John chapter 3 and verse 16. By this we know love, because he laid down his life for us, and we also ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. But whoever has this world's goods and sees his brother in need and shuts up his heart from him, how does the love of God abide in him? My little children, let us not love in word or in tongue, but in deed and in truth. Again, there's that work, indeed, not just in words, but in deed. And how far does that love go? Well, verse 16 tells me that. That love goes so far that I'm willing to die for someone. I'm going to help them to the point of it costing me my life. Why is that? Well, because that's how much Jesus loved us. That's how much we're to love our fellow brothers and sisters. We don't even want to open up our wallet or inconvenience ourselves in time sometimes to help someone else. Again, going back to that, they can somebody else will take care. They need that. That needs doing, but they'll take care of it. If I need, or if someone is in need of help and I'm able to do it, shouldn't I be the one that does that? The poor will always be with us. Jesus told us in Matthew chapter 26 and verse 11. Are we willing to be used in this work? Or do we duck down and hope they'll take care of it? Somebody else, I see the need, and I see them all the time downtown. Some of them are not poor. Some of them are con artists that are making as much money as I am, well, by what they draw from the government, and they're spending it on things that they shouldn't. And then when they're out of that money, then they're going around panhandling. I don't think that we can find where that's our responsibility to put food on their table when they're drawing $6,000 or $7,000 a month. And I know for a fact that some of them are. But Jesus said in Matthew 26 and verse 11, "For you have the poor with you always, but me you do not always have." But no government in history has ever been able to take care of the poor by eradicating those who have, the rich. They can't fix poverty by destroying the wealthy. Being poor is not a sin. Now, some people may make decisions that are sinful that get them in that situation, like the ones that I mentioned downtown. Many of them have problems with addiction, and they started down a path that was sinful, and that's how they ended up the way that they are. But there's nothing sinful about being poor. We should not look down upon somebody because they don't have more money than we do. That's not how our society looks at it, though, is it? We look at wealth very favorably. He must be smart. He must be a hard worker. There's nothing wrong with someone if they choose to make a living honestly, but they don't make a lot of money. But if we see someone in need, we should be willing to help them. And what about laboring in our daily living? The perfect example is always Jesus that we can look to. And in Luke's account, he says that in Acts chapter 1 and verse 1. He taught and he did. Acts chapter 1 and verse 1, "The former account I made, O Theophilus, of all that Jesus began both to do and teach." He did it in front of them. He lived the life in front of them. Just like James was talking about, when we're a doer of the work. Well, Jesus did the work. When we do our religion, then that will open up those doors of opportunity to talk to someone about our religion. That's when they'll be interested in hearing what we have to say when they see us modeling it in front of them. We're to live according to that worthy calling. No, are we going to live perfect? No. Not a one of us, if we're being honest, is going to live perfectly. But we're to live to the best of our ability to that higher calling that we have been called to. Paul said he would hear whether or not they were doing that in Philippians chapter 1 and verse 27. Is this what the world sees in us? Is this how Westview Church of Christ, the group that assembles here, is that how our congregation is viewed? Is the reputation that we have around not only this city, but around with the churches in the area? They're a church that works for the Lord. Philippians chapter 1 and verse 27, "Only let your conduct be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear of your affairs, that you stand fast in one spirit, with one mind, striving together for the faith of the gospel." The church is more than just a preaching station. The church is symbolic of work. And we're to have hands and feet that do the work that's needed to be done. A perfect example of that, as I was working on this lesson, I remembered back a few years ago, Dad and I had went up to Bradford Place to visit somebody, and we ran into their chaplain, who happened to be a woman. We'll leave that for another topic. But this was while Brother Hollis was volunteering there. This goes back before COVID and all that. But she was talking, we said we knew him, and she described how helpful he was. Not only his willingness to help anyone that was around there, but the cheerful way in which he did it. And isn't that just the perfect example? That should be said about every Christian. That's how we should be known in the community. No, those weren't church members that he was over there in front of. But they knew how hard of a worker he was and how happy he was to be working with them. And I would say he would tell you that he got more out of it than what they did. But that's showing the example in front of others. That's letting your light shine. That then opens the door to someone. Why do you work so hard? Why are you living this way? Why? Because, and here's why. Let me talk to you about this hope that I have. Our labor, we have this hope because our labor will not be in vain. Whatever we do for the Lord, 1 Corinthians chapter 15, beginning in verse 50, whatever work that is done for the Lord will be rewarded. We work in this world and we're rewarded with a paycheck. Some of us may have to sign contracts to get it. Some just go in to an hourly job and get it. But we work during the week, and then however the pay schedule's set up, we get that paycheck for the hours that we've worked for them, for our boss. Well, we're banking up these hours for not only benefit in this life, because there is great benefit to being a Christian while on this earth, but the benefit in this life to come, in the life to come. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and verse 58, Paul says, "Now this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does corruption inherit incorruption. Behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. So when this corruptible has put on incorruption, and this mortal has put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your sting? O Hades, where is your victory? The sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is the law. But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, knowing that your labor is not in vain in the Lord." Why is it not in vain? Because I have that home in heaven waiting for me when I leave this earth, if my work has been done in the Lord. That labor will be rewarded 1,000,000 times over, whatever it cost us on this earth, if we remain faithful. Because as Paul says, flesh and blood and corruptions, they're not going to inherit the kingdom of heaven. If we live for this world and for the pleasures within it, and we do no work for the Lord, then we're not going to have that inheritance when we die and leave this earth. But if we have served Him, if we have done the work that needs to be done, if we've lived the Christian life the correct way, then when we die and leave this earth, we can rest assured that we'll have a home with Him in heaven for eternity. If you're subject to the Lord's invitation in any way, if there's something that needs to be corrected in your life and you need help doing that, you need strength and prayers, then let's take care of that now while we have the opportunity as we stand and sing.